Welcome to the Encore Audio Archives YouTube channel. I'm Taper Dave, and this is my channel. I've uploaded hundreds of talks here that I've recorded at meetings in West LA, and I've also recorded conventions starting in 2013. I've got a bunch of those up. And Walt and Mary Murray, the original owners of Encore Audio Archives, started the company in the 80s, and Walt recorded Joe and Charlie's and a bunch of stuff down in Vista, California. My sobriety date is June 20th of 1994. I hope you find something you like, so please like and subscribe to my channel and comment down below. If you want to hear something that I don't have or that you don't see, I'll see that I get it. Anyways, take care and have a great day if you want to.
Tonight's speaker is Michael.
Hi, I'm Michael, and I'm an alcoholic. Hi, everybody. Friday night rodeo. I have not been to this meeting in 21 years. I wasn't going to say this. My sponsor once told me I was not sober enough to come to this meeting. He said that I couldn't come to it without getting a resentment. I should wait until I'm healthy and sober enough to come here. I called him today and I said, is it okay if I speak there? It is good. I want to thank Jeff and Marin, wherever you are, for asking me to speak tonight. I am an alcoholic. It's not a moral, ethical issue as far as I'm concerned. It's not a right or wrong, good or bad thing. It's just a fact. I'm not an authority on alcoholism. I'm not even an authority on myself. Pat H. may be. My wife of 22 years is. She has 9 months more than me. What you're going to hear up here are my opinions, and hopefully accurately I'm going to report some of my experiences in sobriety. If I offend anybody, that is not my intention. Hopefully I won't. I'm pretty deadly serious about Alcoholics Anonymous. An underline deadly. I'm born and raised in Toronto, Canada, and I'm the oldest of 5 kids. My mom had 18 brothers and sisters. They all had at least 5 children. I used to go to bed counting my first cousins, and I used to run out of cousins somewhere around 95 or 97. And as far as I know, I was the first in my gene pool to get to Alcoholics Anonymous in 1983. And this disease has been killing my family for generations. When I was about 5 years old, I was doing a job in Europe, and on the way back, I got kind of stuck in London, and it happened actually twice. But this time I thought, it was before Christmas, and I thought, God, you know, for a Christmas present, maybe I'll go to one of those heraldry, you know, where your genealogy and heraldry houses and stuff, and I got like 48 hours I got to kill. So I went and I found, they gave me this little guy who could speak all the different languages and read Latin and stuff, and we went over to some library in this church. I'm going back about 17 years now, and we looked up our name, my family name, and I wanted to chase it back as far as I could and get it all like in family tree and impress everybody for Christmas, put it all on a scroll. It kind of backfired a little bit. I found out my uncle, who had a thing about Italians, was actually Italian. The Passmores, my mom's maiden name, her brother, who had fought during the Second War and had this huge issue. I had to find that one out. And my family name, I traced it back. And in these heraldry books, they put a little something by everyone's name. You know, they try and say something nice. You know, like, this was the guy that could throw the wheat the highest, you know, or, oh, is there any McFaddens here? Oh, God, I better not. Well, it means lover of sheep, but, because there was an in-law named McFadden, and that didn't go over too well either. I apologize. Thank God you're a lady, and not from Arkansas or something. But or Ontario. But they did. They said there was something nice, they said, in every name. You know, under certain names, they'd say, this is the man that could rub pine and make it, and called French rubbing. It could make it look like oak or you know, ebony and stuff. And they had a little nice thing to say. Under Edmund Ironside, they had, he liked warm ale and port mixed together. He had gout, and his nickname was Crotchpot. Sounds like alcoholism to me, you know. I mean, if that's the best you could say about that guy. He also backed John at Runnymede when nobody else in the House of Lords would back him, and he lost. He was the only guy. And when John lost everything, he lost everything, and all his bastard son ran off to Scotland, and that's how my family ended up in Scotland. But everywhere I looked in these heraldry books, it was like there was this overriding kind of explanation of self-destructive, irrational behavior, making the wrong choices and the wrong decisions. I grew up in a family that, working class family, east end of Toronto. On our little street, Blong Avenue, there was 6 families related on that street. There was between 22 and 25 kids on the street were all related. There was only 25 houses on it. All the houses were row housing, working class row housing, but 12.5 feet wide. They were built at the turn of the century by Colgate-Palmolive. And my dad used to say you could fart in the front bedroom and smell it in the kitchen, and that was pretty true. You know, it was a very small house, and when you get 5 kids, a couple of dogs, assortment of broken animals and parrots and birds and snakes and stuff, it gets kind of crowded, and you get to resolve your stuff really quick, or, you know, and a lot of it was at very high pitch and a lot of volume. But to avoid the alcoholism was impossible when I look back. The men would start drinking on Friday night, you know, after they got home from work. It would usually run into early Saturday morning, there'd be a huge punch up and somebody would lose teeth, or there'd be a fight and windows would be broken and stuff. Saturday, they'd all get together, sort of go, what the hell happened? We shouldn't drink at home. We should drink out of home. So they all go down to the public houses. And they would all get drunk and fight and punch other people's teeth out. And on Sunday, they would recover and go back to work. And I can remember at a very early age, sitting in that bowling alley of a backyard of mine, 12.5 feet wide. All the houses are attached, and looking through the kitchen window. And I remember I was sitting on we had this kind of secondhand swing set with one swing on it, you know, and I remember getting down on my knees and praying because I wanted a new family, because what was going on in the kitchen was my mom's 2 brothers, my Uncle Bill and my Uncle Joe and my Uncle Jim, had my dad's only friend in the neighborhood up against the wall and were punching him in the groin. My father was sitting at the kitchen table, not making any noise, but the tears just running down his face. My mother was slamming the cupboard door, trying to get their attention. And my Uncle Bill, who was my favorite, and he's the only one still alive, was laying in a fetal position under the bed, under their kitchen table, and crying. And I remember, it was the only time I remember praying as a child. And I remember, you know how you pray for a new school or a new neighborhood? I wanted a whole new family. It was like I had a sense of something was wrong. I remember thinking, I want a new family. And I remember leaning against the fence, and I was in shorts because I can remember feeling the grass and some of the gravel and stuff on my knees. So, I mean, there was an awareness of that at an early age. For anyone who was raised in an alcoholic household, hey, Diego. It's all right, Ral. We'll save him a seat. Yeah. Here's a little miracle for you. For anyone who can't see, we got a 23-month-old child out here that he's a product of sobriety. The thing that I know about an alcoholic household, now, if any of you come from an alcoholic household, what I define as an alcoholic household is one where there is no emotional consistency. I can remember being able to dance and sing on a Monday night and get hugs and kisses for it. And then on a Thursday night do this very same routine and get thrown against a wall. You just never knew. I was always constantly trying to read in between, the lines and the pages, like gauging everyone's kind of emotional content. and a sense of sadness that would overwhelm our family. It was like it would choke people. I can remember that sense of sorrow and sadness and I'm not saying there's no love in here. The amazing thing that I'm sober, my sister got sober, I'm the oldest of 5. My sister Wendy got sober a year after me. My middle brother Billy got sober a year after her. Beverly, the youngest, got sober. She just celebrated 10 years. Her husband's sober, got sober a month after her. He just came up on 10 years himself. All this. There had to be some sense of love in my family, but the problem is that it was just not consistent. There was no consistent role modeling of any kind. It was interesting this morning, one of the topics at the morning meeting I go to was about character defects, and they brought up false pride. And I was thinking, we were talking about it in the car with one of the guys I sponsor on the way home, and I was thinking, I never got any consistent validation as a kid. You just, like I was saying, you dance one way on a Monday night and the same way on a Thursday night. There was never any consistency. To have false pride was an absolute necessity to survive my life, I mean, when we get into those steps, where it talks about character defects and shortcomings, I don't know about you guys, but I absolutely needed those to survive. Until I got to this program, I didn't have any defenses. I wasn't raised in a place where I had self-esteem. I operated on fear well into my sobriety. Fear was my motivator. Fear of getting caught, fear of getting some kind of disclosure. If they ever find out who I really am, if I ever let my guard down, if I ever let that performance down, God help me. And if anyone liked me, I didn't like me, so you got no taste. It's that old Groucho Marx thing. I mean, I don't want to be a part of a club that would have me as a member. It was the same thing. I would get relationships and I think, what the? Fight like mad and do every kind of performance I could think of to get somebody to like me or love me. And then just fall for the person in the corner that really thought I was a piece of shit and try and go get them to convince them to love me. If I could get that one to love me, then I'd be fixed. My definition of alcoholism is looking for something on the outside to fix my insides. I remember in early sobriety, there was guys that come into the log cabin, and I could never really figure out what to call myself, because alcoholic didn't seem enough, alcoholic addict didn't seem enough, alcoholic pillhead, alcoholic pillhead, Then one guy, this Sandy guy, came in, and he was kind of like happy guy with curly hair and always smiling, and he said, "I'm Sandy, I'm a stimulus augmenter." And I thought, yeah, that's cool. I got that one, So the next morning I was sitting against the wall waiting for it and put my hand up and I said, "I'm Michael, I'm a stimulus augmenter." And my buddy Mingo spit on my foot. He said, "Fuck you." And there's a few people here that are old enough to remember Mingo. Mingo lives in Sacramento now and he's alive and well, and he's all right. For those that don't know you, that applause is gratitude. I drank and used. I should get there. I drank and used. I didn't have a drug of choice. My drug of choice was anything you got, and hopefully I don't have to pay for it. And I haven't spoken in a while, and I'm getting kind of emotionally overwhelmed here a little bit because I'm actually looking at my life when I'm talking to you, and I haven't done that almost since last fall. And I'm impressed that I'm sober. And no, I'm absolutely serious. I really am absolutely serious. People, I watched myself do some ungodly things. I watched myself be a kind of passenger on my back in my alcoholism when it was active, and just watched me do things that after you come down, or after I'd come down, and after the rush of it was over, I would sit there and literally sometimes I would vomit. I was so frightened, you know. Some of the, not high points, but low points of my drinking and using is, I had a full-time job at night from the time I was 11 until I was 19, and we kind of needed the money, and I used to come home from school in a rush to that little house to dump my stuff and get on the bus, and I used to clean factories at night. And one night I came home, I was somewhere between, I used to think I was 15, but my sister corrected me and says she thinks I was 13. But I came home, and my mom, who had not been a drinker, my dad had been the drinker, he stopped drinking. He went dry in 1963 when I was 13, 14, and my mom started drinking. And she wouldn't say shit if she had a mouthful of it. And all of a sudden, this woman, this little 5'2" by 5'2" by 5'2" woman that never left the house, started drinking. And I came back down through the laneways from my school, and my mom was not home, you know. And then the phone rang. And somebody in the neighborhood who didn't say who they were said, "Your mom's in the back lane by Levain, and she's on her hands and knees." And I went, wow, you know, and I went running down, and there was my mom, covered in vomit, and she'd peed herself, and she on her hands and knees crawling down the lane, and it absolutely terrified me. And I remember thinking, I got to get her home before Dad gets home, and I got to get her work. I can't lose this job. And I couldn't get my mom up, and I started kicking her to get her to go. I was so terrified. I started kicking her, and got her going, and got her to the back lane, the back gate to our backyard. My sister grabbed her, and we got Mom upstairs, and she wiped Mom down, and we got her into bed before Dad came home, and I took off. And I remember the next day when my mom was complaining about how she had broken some ribs. She thought she'd been in a blackout, and she was so ashamed that she had done it while she was drinking, and I didn't have the courage to tell her. I didn't. She died when I was 23 before I got sober, and I never got to make that amends to her face to face, you know. That's kind of a scary thing, you know. I dated a woman on weekends for 9 years, and she got pregnant, and just after my mom, we found out she was pregnant just after my mom died, actually. And I kind of think when I look back through inventories, I kind of married her on a rebound of kind of thing. But I didn't know you don't marry people when they're pregnant. Every one of my family, except my Uncle Bill, who's still alive, all the women had been pregnant when they got married, and all the men had gotten women pregnant when they got married. So it was just a natural thing, I guess, and I never questioned it. And the marriage didn't work. It lasted 18 months. We got an absolutely incredible daughter out of it. But around somewhere between 16 and 18 months, I was babysitting that little baby, and I don't remember it being a bad night or anything like that. I was just having a few beers, sitting at home. My wife was at nursing college at that time. She was trying to get her nursing license. And I went in to check on the baby in the back room in this duplex that we had bought with my sister and my brother-in-law. And as I was coming out of the nursery, I realized I'd punched my daughter while she was in her crib. And I got to tell you, I didn't go in there to do that. I wasn't even aware I'd done it until I had done it. And I was not heavily drunk or medicated. From that moment on, I became a father at arm's distance. I did not trust myself. I would put down my life for my daughter. And I thought, you are insane. You are out of your mind. So I wouldn't go anywhere near her. So I remember calling my sister. I locked myself in the bathroom, and I called my sister, who was downstairs, and the baby was crying. I said, could you come up and look after Tooch, you know? I'm sick. I'm in the bathroom. And she said, sure. And Wendy came up and got the baby. And another memory I remember is when she was a baby, I was out front of the house, and I have a couple of suicide attempts in my drinking, using one of my sobriety and early sobriety. So I don't treat suicide lightly, but I remember, this isn't one of them, but I remember throwing the baby up in the air and throwing her up in the air and catching it. And then one time I threw her up in the air, and I remember getting this thought. I thought, if I don't catch her, she can hit the sidewalk, she'll die, and then I can die. And children are pretty intuitive. I remember her sort of like, you know how cats get? She went, ah, as I caught her, and she gave me one of those looks like, fucking put me down. There's a few people in this room actually know her and have had some of those looks from her. But I didn't trust myself around her or anything. I became isolated within my own life because I was insane. I didn't think I was an alcoholic addict. I didn't really monitor the amount of chemicals and alcohol I was taking into my system. I was crazy. And when people suggested I not drink or use, I thought, you're nuts. You don't want me not drinking and using. I used to try and do that, you know? I used to punch holes in walls to try and get an adrenaline rush just to calm down. My family had, for generations, like my grandmother died in an insane asylum, you know? My Uncle Paul set himself on fire in front of us, just pouring shit and set himself on fire. My Uncle Joe would lay in the middle of the bloody living room when naked and shoot urine in the air screaming, "Kelly's green," you know? I mean, I know, it's like just another Friday night on Blanc Avenue, you know? And I remember somebody asking me, saying, what's going on, you know? And I said, well, anyway, I left that girl, you know, I left that woman who, when we broke up, she became a police officer. And graduated with the highest honors in the police academy, highest female to ever graduate from the police academy in Canada. Later on, went on to be the highest decorated police officer in the history of Canada, and is now the assistant chief of police in Toronto, my hometown. And bit of an Al-Anon. She used to hang all her clothes 2 inches apart, you know, the short blouses, then the medium ones, and the long ones. Clean the ashtray out, you know, when you're halfway through your cigarette. And, boy, I blew a hole right through her life. I remember I had 5 impaired driving charges in Canada and 1 here in the States, and I remember being in the bullpen down at number 1 station in Toronto, and she walked in, and my cousin was also a fairly big name cop, who I later 12-stepped, and he's now sober. And she came in, and I spit blood through the mesh on her, screaming at her, "If you can't fucking help me, get the fuck out of my face." And there's just no way you can make amends to these people. That's a living amends that I got to make to that woman. She did a fabulous job raising our daughter until, I'll get to that too, that's a miracle. You know, how I ran away. I drank and used and drank and used and drank and used and drank and used until people weren't returning phone calls. Nobody wanted to see me showing up. I got a bit of a film career going at the time. I did a lot of work in Canada at the time, and I was trying to do a little bit of drug dealing on the side, you know. And I wasn't a good drug dealer. I was doing this deal in coke paste out of Vancouver, and I took money from one group of people that didn't, you know, and another group of people that they didn't like each other. It was 2 groups from different parts of the city. It was this. And Italian guys and this Polish bunch of guys, and I put the deal together and gave half of it away during a blackout. And the Italian guys got to me and got their end, and the last thing I remember saying is, like, "You shouldn't have done that," as they were kicking me, and the Slauco guy is looking for you. And the word on the street was, don't kill him, just bust him up. Let's see if the mofo can act with straight legs and, you know, no pelvis. So what I did is I broke into the only person that was still semi a friend, and he had been a manager of mine for a while, and he kept all his drugs and money in his freezer. So I broke into his house and took whatever I could find in the freezer and headed for the airport. And I thought, I'll go to Los Angeles, they'll never look for me there. Smart alcoholic thinking, you know. And crashed and burned here in Los Angeles. I got here in the mid-late '82 and crashed and burned in September of 1983. What happened was that I completely ran out of people that would show up. You know, I would have loved somebody to be angry with me. What caused me the most pain was that when you look in somebody's eyes, like a brother-in-law that's been there. My brother-in-law, Marty, I brought him home in grade 9. He never left. He married my sister. He's a dyed-in-the-wool Al-Anon. And I remember him after my 4th impaired driving charge. He picked me up and there was absolute disinterest in his eyes. I would have loved him to be angry, you know? He wasn't. He was just that kind of tombstone dead, like, whatever, you know? I was getting a lot of whatever in the spring of '83. And by the fall of '83, I had nothing. And I was staying in the apartment of a friend of the secretary of the agency that was supposed to be repping me and who I couldn't show up for. I was about 20 pounds heavier than I am now. I was yellow, and I don't mean to gross anyone out. My butt had not closed for about 6 months. I think I invented Depends. I used to get Pampers and cut them off and stick them in my pants because I thought I had butthole cancer, you know, and I thought, you know, you laugh too loud, you yell too loud, shit literally falls out of you. You don't wear white. It's the truth. You know, you kind of stand around as tight-assed as possible and kind of look cool, you know, with one leg in front of the other. And when you get bumped and you got to move quick, you check. I found out later, if you don't eat vegetables and fruit, that's an involuntary muscle. It will not close. You can't live on wine and beer nuts.
Sorry to interrupt your viewing. Taper Dave here. Just wanted to take a second to ask you to like and subscribe to my channel. Let me know if you like what you're listening. I've got some very good talks here, and this one's a great one. Just curious, do you think this is better than Zoom? Tell me what you think.
It just won't work. But that also was restored to be in sobriety. But I was staying in this apartment, and I was supposed to water the plants, and they'd given me this key, and when I got there, I remember the key didn't fit because I had a little bit of dope. I had some pills and stuff I wanted to take, and I thought the key won't fit, so I kicked the door in. And I thought, I'll fix it before these people get back, because it was a friend of a secretary of somebody over in West Hollywood. And I was in there, and they had a piggy bank with some big piggy bank, one of those big glass jars, you know, with paper in it, and nickels and dimes was silly. And took out the paper first, and I kept little notes of how much I was taking. I was going to put it back, you know, when I hit something. And then I took the quarters, and then the dimes, and near the end, after about a week and a half, I was rolling up pennies, you know. And I remember going out one night, just going to go down along Santa Monica and meet up with a guy that owed me some money, and I was hoping I was going to borrow some money off him. I'd run into him and hope I knew he was going to be hanging out, so I was going to go down and shake him down for it. And I had rolls of pennies I'd taken with me. And the next thing I remember is coming to in front of this door, pushing in so I could get through, you know, and I had a bottle of either tequila or vodka with a handle in it. I had a Glad bag full of blow, about that much in the bottom of it, about a half an ounce. And I had a bottle of green chartreuse with a cork in it, and it was covered in grease and fuzz. You know, like when you put bottles over a stove in a kitchen and all the grease goes up and then the dust gets on it. So I've been in somebody's house, and to this day I don't know where I got this stuff, because I went out with rolls of pennies and I came back with probably about $3,800 worth of stuff. And so I basically sat there and would do a little bit, you know, drink a little bit, check to see if the sun's up, the moon's up, pig out, until it was all gone. And I was doing a lot of scratching in those days. You remember scratching? When you get dehydrated and your skin's like rice paper, and maybe you don't. I remember running out of cigarettes, and all the drugs were gone, and all the alcohol was gone. Actually, I don't know if it was all gone, because I broke it all down into quarter ounces and hid it all over the apartment, then tore the apartment apart trying to find it. When I counted all the papers up, there was 2 missing. So I systematically took this place apart. You know, if you go crazy and rip shit off the walls, you can really destroy it. And I wasn't going to do that. I was going to do the Ray Milland Lost Weekend thing. So I systematically took the dirt out of the plants. I systematically undid all the frames on the pictures. Systematically took the bed apart, looking for it. You do it systematically, you destroy the goddamn place. So I went out to get cigarettes, and I was going down to Santa Monica Boulevard with these pennies to buy some cigarettes in the middle of the night. And all I remember is this Hasidic Jewish fellow was in there with one of those hats and the beer and the glasses in the 7-Eleven store. And it only occurred to me about 5 or 6 years ago, maybe he wasn't there. But I remember having all these rolls of pennies, and I'd gotten some cigarettes, and I was kind of thinking, I got to get some dough. And I saw a flash of cash, and this guy had a roll, you know. So I kind of hung out outside and kind of guessed where he would go. And I went around Havenhurst there, and I hid him behind these dumpsters, and I saw which way he was going. I kind of skipped around behind. And I was just going to hip check him into the dumpsters as he went by and take his stuff off him. And I want to say there was not a big dramatic moment. It really wasn't. What happened was I got a moment of clarity of being a child. When I was sitting there in those dumpsters, maybe it was hide and seek, I don't know. All I remember is he started to go by, and I went to step out, and it was like, I just got absolutely mortified. And I thought, this is not what I grew up to be. This is not what I wanted to be. And he just walked off into the night, and I ran back to that apartment, and I hid in that apartment. And the next thing I remember is, evidently I'd called somebody during those 3 days I was doing drugs and alcohol to come and talk, you know, to see if they could help me get a job. And they showed up. And I'm told that I said to them, how come you look so good? And they said, I haven't done drugs or alcohol in 3.5 years. And I said, what are you taking to do that? And they, the main thing I remember from that encounter is that their smile hurt. And they took me off to my first AA meeting. I drank again that afternoon. At that meeting, I remember everyone laughing, but they were really laughing. Some people were crying, and they were really crying. And at the end of the meeting, everyone stood up and held hands. And when this guy, this English fellow with a very loud voice, who later I found out was Mickey Lush and Lime Lodi, I remember because he was louder in my head, but he reached and he said, here, mate. And I said, fuck you. And he said, right, fuck him. And reached in front of me. And I remember thinking, I'm doing this wrong again. I'm doing this wrong again. I'm outside of it. And they said something like, if you can drink like a couple of ounces of alcohol every day for 30 days, you probably don't have a problem. And I said, yeah, maybe, I don't know, maybe. And they went and rushed and fought over what they were going to give me, because it was at the Improv on Thursday, I later found out. And they came back with these 2 shots of vodka and said, drink it. And I went, this is kind of radical shit, you know. And I was so done in, I wanted some pills or some pot or something. I didn't want to put anything in his body. And I drank it, and I said, yeah, I'm gone, and I'm out of here. And I'd listened to them about this idea, about 2 ounces a day for 30 days. And I went to the only guy in town that I figured would validate how I felt. And he was this messed up director who lived over here in Westwood. And I went over to him, and I told him what had gone down. And he said, and he swears he didn't say, he's now sober too. But he said to me, he says, yeah, you're an alcoholic and I'm an alcoholic. He says, but what we should do is just drink wine and beer through the week, you know, and then drink booze on the weekends. And I said, no, they said I got to drink 2 ounces a day for 30 days. And I remember Paul looking at me and going, He said, you know, you could probably do that because you're a mean enough son of a bitch, you know, but it won't change the way you feel inside. And I wanted to fucking kill him because he was my last hope. He was the guy that was sicker than me, you know. And I remember bailing out of there, and I swear to God, I don't know what happened. I got some money off him. I think I drank some more off the 7-Eleven on Westwood Boulevard, right opposite near Ohio Street there. And you got a short dog of bourbon or something. And I ended up back at this person's house at 2 in the morning, evidently. And they said, I knocked on the door, and they came to the door, and I said, I'm an alcoholic. And I remember them putting their hand over my mouth and saying, that's good enough. We'll pick you up tomorrow night at 7:30. Do not drink or use or do anything between then and now. And they kind of bailed into a car and drove me back to this place I was staying in and pushed in the door and put the knife back in the door frame and sat there in the mess. And I remember the next night getting a bunch of rolls of pennies and, you know, like the good alcoholic, I was going out, so I only brushed the front of my front teeth. And stand out in the street all yellow and pampered up and everything. And they showed up. And they took me to Rodeo, I found out. For years, I didn't know where they took me. And at the old Rodeo meeting, there was a stage, and I sat over on the side. They sat me with some huge gentleman, some 300 to 400 pounder who to this day, I don't know who it was. And I didn't know because I had missed the meeting before how it started. I had no idea what was going on, and they asked for the newcomers, and they asked for out-of-towners, and the guy said, "You're from out of town, aren't you?" And I said, "Yeah." He said, "He's from out of town." And the speaker looked over and said, "Where are you from?" And I went, "Toronto." And he said, "What's your name?" And I went, "Michael." And we all wait, you all wait, we all waited. And I waited, and I thought, what the fuck is going on? Because I'd missed the beginning of the other meeting. And the big, heavy-set guy beside me elbowed me, and he said, "Say you're a fucking alcoholic, or we'll be here all goddamn night." So I said, "I'm an alcoholic," and everyone clapped. That was September 23rd, 1983. I have not drank or used since then. No, wait a minute, whoa, fuck that. No. I tried to commit suicide in 9 months of sobriety. Because all I did was stop drinking and using, and do the first and second step. That was it, two-stepping. I think it's described I did the first and second step and a little bit of the 12th step. It's like, I'm an alcoholic, everything I touch turns to shit, and you're an alcoholic too. We should go to a meeting. And it worked. It worked for a long time. And at 9 months of sobriety, I was with a lady one night who was not in our program, and we had a conversation, and when I left there, I realized I was the piece of shit that I'd always been. I just was dry. I was drinking, and I was doing it all wrong. And I realized later in my inventories that, and that's why I'm talking about suicide. Suicide is, for me, was an act of control. Rather than turn my life or my will over to the care of this program or a higher power that I don't always understand, and it's not necessary for me to understand, I will take control of my life by destroying it. I've always taken control of things by my ability to destroy them, And I went over, I was driving along, and I saw that, I went looking, and I knew a friend of mine who had this incredible Italian inlaid 12 gauge, and he used to use salt in it because junkies would always come in through his windows and he'd shoot them in the legs with it. And I went in there and I thought, well, and he was cooking chocolate pecan cookies for the morning meeting. And he was in his underwear and hot July. And I said, "Hey, yeah." And he said, "How you doing?" I said, "I'm all right. I'm just glad you're here, 2 in the morning," and all like that. And I waited for him to go in the washroom, and I dashed into his bedroom and tried to crack the shotgun and look for, I didn't want to shoot my face off with salt. And I found some deer shot that he'd been using and that he dumped out before he put the salt in. And he tackled me just as I rotated the gun. And he sat on my chest and fed me, he says, 18 chocolate chip cookies. And I bawled and cried like a baby. And I think that was my true surrender. I think that was my absolute surrender. That my way of doing things did not work. And I started a 4-step the next day. For a man named KLB, I read him my 5th step. He said to me, "Don't make a decision on your 5th until you're finished with your 4th." And I read it, I wrote it, and I did everything. I put it all down. I was thorough. I was absolutely fearless and thorough. I had everything in there. All the homosexual stuff that I was never going to tell anybody that I had to do to get what I needed, all the violent stuff, all the thieving, all the lying, it was all in there. And I go to read it to him, and I looked across the table, and I thought, he will not understand. And in the book, it says, be careful when you choose. And I beat myself up for years, because what I did is I paraphrased. When I got to the sexual abuse I'd gone through as a child, I paraphrased it when I got to that point. When I got to the punching my daughter in her crib, I didn't talk about that. When I got to the part about kicking my mom, I didn't talk about that. When I talked about, stealing money from people and then blaming them for robbing me, and just all I kind of glazed over that stuff, because I kept looking at him and I thought, he's just not gonna, he's too squeaky clean. And God loved him, he's a great guy. I just knew that he wasn't gonna have. And what happened afterwards is we burned the inventory, and I remember looking at it and thinking, oh my God, there it all goes. And he said, here's your amends list, and like that. And he moved into New York, and I had to get a new sponsor. And I started going to less and less meetings. And I I was up at Yuck on a Wednesday afternoon, and I was listening to this guy speak, and I thought, and I got closer and closer, and I looked down, and I thought, this guy doesn't look smart enough to be making this shit up. And when it was all over, I asked him to be my sponsor. I said, you know, Cale left town, and I need somebody to work with. And he was this little blonde-haired, bearded guy, and Pat. And I said, I waited till everyone was gone. I said, could you work with me? And he says, yeah, I'll call. He says, call me every day. And he said, but what's going on? I thought I'd test him with the fifth step stuff. Then if he tells me I'm a piece of shit or raises his voice, I'm out of here. I can go get loaded, or I can go kill myself. And he said, what's going on? I said, well, I was not going to tell him the real deep secrets. But I said, I did a fifth step with Cale, and I lied all the way through it. And I waited for the opportunity to lay him out, you know. And he put his hand forward on my shoulder, and he said, oh, my God, that must really hurt. And I started crying. And he's been my sponsor ever since. We're coming up on 22 years together. I got to tell you, I met my wife in Alcoholics Anonymous. My first date with her was I asked her to come get my first-year cake with me at Rodeo. And that was the last time I was here. And I said, because I thought she couldn't turn me down, it was a classy place. She did. That was our first date. A year later, she moved into with me. We got married a year after that. We're still together. She has 9 months more than me. We have an 8-year-old daughter. I sponsor a lot of guys. I found out you can't have intimacy without equality, and it doesn't matter if it's man, man, woman, woman, friendship, marriage. You know, superiority and inferiority, alcoholic superiority and inferiority will not work. And I used to hear people from the podium say, if I could give you a minute of my life now, I pray I could do that, you know. And I now know that to be true because I stand at the front of meetings sometimes and I look at people suffering and having doubts, and I wish I could give you a minute of my life now. Please keep coming back.
I think we got a great talk going on here. Thanks for watching the channel. Taper Dave here. Just curious, do you think this is better than Zoom? Okay, this is how I prepare my drone for launching. I like to do it inside the cab of my truck so I'm not standing outside in the weather. To install the joysticks for control, up and down, right and left, powered on. I have an Android phone that I use to connect it to the drone with. And it's actually controlled through the iPhone, through an app. Oops, wrong way. It's actually controlled through the iPhone, or through this Android phone, through the app. It's actually controlled through the Android phone, through an app, and you connect it through this short connection right here.
Remote control connected.
Remote control's connected. So I pull out the drone. I have to extend the legs, long legs extended first, then the short legs. Remove the gimbal protector. Set that aside, then power it on one short burst, then one long burst. I lay it down. So I have to go to calibrate. So the drone's not connected yet. It shows you here as this drone gets disconnected, even though the remote's powered on. So the drone has to establish it's connected. So I go into the app to calibration mode. First I'll calibrate the remote controller. Start calibration. Out, in, oop, out, in, up, down, and then this little wheel is to control the gimbal. So it's calibrated. go to gimbal calibration, start calibration, and then it calibrates the gimbal. I don't know if that shows up. The gimbal's moving all over the place. Changes, you can see it on the video. And I'm calibrated to take off. It's acquired 7 satellites at the moment. There are 26 satellites up in the sky, which it has to acquire before you can take off. So it's connected. It's got enough satellites. This is white. I can go to press this little arrow button, swipe right to take off, and it would start the motors if I slid this to the right. But I'll wait till I get outside. Don't want to do it inside.